You know, it seems that each week when we talk to our Ottawa contributor, Brian Lilley, we end up talking about Mr. Bill Morneau, our federal finance minister. Brian, Mr. Morneau is now threatening to sue anyone who claims he did anything wrong.
You know, Hal, I keep thinking this story's going to die and that it won't have any legs. And then something new comes out. Okay, so let's back this up a little bit. It started on Monday. The Conservatives, Pierre Poilievre, Conservative MP from the Ottawa area, stood up in the House of Commons and said, Mr. Speaker, we're noticing that the finance minister admitted to selling 680,000 shares in Morneau Chappelle. Of course, that's Bill Morneau's family company, the one he was executive chairman of, the one that he led until he was elected. We noticed he said that in late 2015, he sold 680,000 shares. Well, there were 680,000 shares traded at the very end of November, 1 week before this very same finance minister tabled a Ways and Means motion in the House of Commons. Now, a Ways and Means motion, Hal, for people that don't follow parliamentary procedure, that aren't wonks like you and I, that's the way to change the tax law. It's not through a bill, it's a Ways and Means motion. And this was the one that would say, okay, we are going to tax people at the very top at 33%. They moved it up from 29% to 33%. Normally, these things take effect on a fiscal year. He stands up in the House of Commons, tables this a week after he sells his shares. Guess what? The whole stock market plummets. Not just Morneau Chappelle, but Morneau Chappelle and the rest of the Toronto Stock Exchange drops 5%. So
did he make like $500,000 too, like $500,000?
Yeah, by selling them a week earlier, he saved nearly $500,000. So this is, all right, was he moving early because he's working on inside information? These are the claims. Bill Morneau refuses on Monday. He's asked more than 12 times about this, refuses to answer on Monday. On Tuesday, this is the day of the big apology that the government's making to gay and lesbian Canadians that were drummed out of the civil service, the armed forces, the RCMP, and so on. That's going to be the dominant story. If he had just kept his mouth shut, this story dies. Bill Morneau walks out just before the apology is about to be made and says, yeah, I sold my shares. I didn't do anything wrong. And if you claim I did, I'm going to sue you. Well, all of a sudden, suddenly the story isn't that apology. It's also the finance minister admitted he sold his shares a week before he changed the tax laws. And now everyone's talking about it. Pierre Poilievre kept trying to ask the finance minister about this. Of course, the finance minister didn't show up in question period that day. The prime minister just kept saying, ethics commissioner, ethics commissioner, ethics commissioner. He followed the rule, the guidance of the ethics commissioner. The parliamentary secretary said the same thing. So Pierre Poilievre, the Conservative MP who's been the point man on this, actually stood up and said, I'm going to go outside of the House and see if the finance minister's there and ask him the question, because that was Bill Morneau's dare. He said, ask me the question outside of the House. Of course, inside of the House of Commons, anything an MP says, you can't sue them for. It's parliamentary privilege. You can ask about anything. But if you say it outside of the House of Commons, the actual chamber, you can be sued. So Pierre went out. He talked to reporters. He said, where's Bill? I want to ask him a question. Where's Bill? He wasn't there. He came back in. He asked more questions. He got zero answers. And, Bill Morneau gave this story life and legs yet again by his actions in the past and his actions this week.
Well, it makes our job a lot more fun as journalists, I got to tell you that. Now, Canada's looking, speaking of ethics commissioner, they're looking for a new ethics commissioner, but 4 top aides in the Prime Minister's office cannot be part of the selection process. Why is that?
Because they are part of the investigation into the Prime Minister's trip to the private island of the Aga Khan. Yeah, we all remember this. It's the New Year's Eve, going in from 2016 to 2017. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau tweets out, hey, happy Canada 150, no better place to be than Ottawa. Except he wasn't in Ottawa. The only reason anyone asked was, he was tweeting out no better place to be than Ottawa, but the most image-conscious prime minister that any of us can remember is not there. The Governor General's there. You've got country music star Brett Kissel from Edmonton there. You've got all these artists there performing, but the prime minister's not there. And so journalists start asking questions. Where's the prime minister? Well, he was off visiting the Aga Khan's private island on a vacation that saw him use the private helicopter, go to the private island with his friends, including Katie Telford, his chief of staff. So there's several top aides that would normally be consulted on such an important appointment that can't be consulted. Now, the ethics commissioner is actually appointed by all of Parliament, but it's the Prime Minister's office that at least puts the name forward. Mary Dawson has been in this job a long time. She has indicated she doesn't want the job again. They're looking for someone new, but all of a sudden, some of the top aides can't be consulted because they're part of this investigation into whether the Prime Minister violated the ethics rules in taking this vacation at the home of a billionaire who gets hundreds of millions of dollars for his charity from the government of Canada.
Wow.
You know, some might consider that lobbying, Hal. I know that any lobbyist in Ottawa would register for that, but that's just me.
Now, marijuana legislation passed the House of Commons, still has to go to the Senate. Good chance it won't pass before late January or February, and then the provinces need to deal with the law as it's passed. Do you think this is going to put a little extra pressure on those provinces?
Oh, you know what, Hal? I think that this is, you know, we're well past the point of debating whether marijuana legalization is a good idea, bad idea. It's going to happen. But is it going to be rolled out properly? Is the government going to deal with this in a way that doesn't leave the provinces or municipalities scrambling? And I have to say the answer is no. I know you're a big football fan. So am I. If we were to put this in football terms, the Liberals have had bad clock management on this. You know, they should be snapping the ball before the play clock goes down, and they haven't. It is the end of November. We're about to hit December. The House of Commons is going to rise in 2 weeks, and they've just passed this legislation. The Senate, which is going to have a lot of questions, they're going to have to hold their own hearings, as is proper. It's what they should do. They're not there to rubber stamp anything. And Justin Trudeau says he wants them all to be more independent. Well, it's going to take a few months. At that point, once it's passed, that's when the provinces and the municipalities know what the actual law is. An awful lot of people think that the Senate is going to send the bill back with amendments. And if that happens, that delays it even further. Let's say they expedite this, and after the Christmas break, which the MPs and the senators come back at the end of January, let's say they pass it real quick, but with amendments, then it has to go back to the House. The House has to decide, do they accept the amendments? Do they just strip them out and send it back and tell them, hey, you passed this without it? Either way, I mean, we're looking at a July 1st, 2018 deadline that the Prime Minister arbitrarily set for legalization of marijuana, and the provinces and the municipalities won't be ready. They've asked for a delay of up to a year, some of them. I can tell you that won't happen because Justin Trudeau doesn't want pot legalization being rolled out just months before the next federal election. There's going to be hiccups no matter what, how this is done. He doesn't want those hiccups happening, 3, 4, 5 months before an election.
Yeah, that's right. Time count violation, we'll throw it on Justin Trudeau and the Liberals here. Now, as the American political and entertainment world continues to reel from sexual impropriety allegations, Canada's own Department of National Defence has its own issues it's dealing with the subject matter. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so an enterprising reporter called up D&D and said, hey, look, you guys have had problems with this before. And of course, that was one of the apologies the government has made in the past. That happened under the previous Harper administration. Sexual misconduct by members, an awful lot of sexual harassment of female members of the military. And someone called up and said, well, what's been going on the last little while? As we're in this post-Harvey Weinstein era in both entertainment and politics stateside, what's happening in Canada? Well, it turns out 29 different members have been discharged from the military so far this year for different forms of sexual misconduct. Now, we don't know all the details. It could range from harassment to outright rape, which I know is not a legal term anymore, but it's a term that we all know and understand. It's going to run the gamut. We don't know all the details. But the forces also say that they've got dozens of other cases that they're reviewing. The Chief of the Defense Staff, General Jonathan Vance, has said he has a zero tolerance policy for this. And I have to say, I can't fault him for this. I actually like this idea.
Now, Brian, the Liberals all of a sudden are loving free speech and are blasting federal Tory leader Andrew Scheer. Can you explain what happened there?
So Andrew Scheer has been saying, look, if you're not going to support free speech on university campuses that are funded by the government, then maybe you should have some of that funding pulled back. Where there is a Catholic university in Ottawa called St. Paul's. Now, some of St. Paul's will get government funding through the provinces, but an awful lot of it, they're training Catholic priests who are going on to become bishops, canon lawyers, things within the church. And so that part's not government funded. A group came forward and they wanted to rent out the space and they wanted to show a movie that is very pro-abortion. The church officials said, no, you can't show that here. Go show that somewhere else. Well, the Liberals, who've been silent on all kinds of other problems, including there was a teaching assistant at Wilfrid Laurier University, which used to be Waterloo Lutheran University. They changed the name and kept the initials. They were shutting down a teaching assistant that showed a debate on TV Ontario, Ontario's public broadcaster, between a couple of academics, including Jordan Peterson, who's become somewhat of a controversial figure. The Liberals had nothing to say on that, but suddenly they care very much about this issue of free speech on campuses because it involves abortion. The Liberals say they don't want to talk about abortion. This is a settled issue, but they bring it up at every turn to try and wedge Conservatives, whether we're talking federal politics, provincial politics, and that's what's going on here.
Brian, reports say that the end of NAFTA would not actually hurt Canada's GDP all that much. Now, this is a report from one of the big banks and goes against conventional wisdom. The next round of NAFTA talks take place next month in Montreal. How's that shaping up?
Well, as we talked last week, as the discussions were wrapping up in Mexico City, things are still all up in the air. I mean, the last time we talked, it was a discussion about could you make tequila in Alberta or Iowa or what have you? Could you make Canadian whiskey in Tijuana? It's one of the discussions going on. But the latest report is from one of the big banks, you should say, I believe it's TD. And they say, between half and a full percentage point of GDP is all that it would cost us. Now, that's not insignificant. That's a fairly substantial hit to the economy, but it's not the sky is falling idea that so many people have put forward. Now, is this absolute gospel truth? I don't know. I'm going to be looking. This just came out this week. I'm going to be looking to see the reaction from other economists to see if they agree or if they say, no, my colleagues have it wrong this time. Economists can be a bit like lawyers. You ask 3 lawyers for their opinion, you get 5 different opinions. Economists can be much the same. And so it'll be interesting to see what the reaction is like. If this is all it's going to be, then, hey, that's fantastic. But if the majority of economists come out against this report, then that might tell us, you know what, these guys might be a little too rosy and we still need to be worried. But as you say, the next round of talks begin in Montreal next month, and hopefully they're better than the Mexico round because that did not go overly well.
Now, many people here in southern Alberta, including yours truly, still in mourning with the Calgary Stampeders losing to the Toronto Argonauts at the Grey Cup in Ottawa, the big snowball, and you actually took in the party in Ottawa. Tell me a bit about that.
I took in several parties, took in the game. I was at Stamps' house. I was there cheering on the Stamps with my brother. I live in Ottawa. I've been in Ottawa for more than 20 years, 20 years, next January, actually, 20 years. But I'm a Hamilton boy.
Oski-wee-wee.
I cannot cheer for the Toronto Argonauts no matter what. So my brother called me at the last minute and said, hey, let's go to the game. I'm buying tickets. I said, all right, you're buying, I'm in. If you've never been to the Grey Cup, Hal, if the viewers haven't been to the Grey Cup, even if you only go for the parties when it happens in your area. I know it's in Edmonton next year. Maybe you don't want to travel up to that horrible, horrible city of Edmonton. I know that's how you view it from where you are. I don't mind Edmonton, but I know in southern Alberta, there's a rivalry. Go in, take in the game. If you can't even take in the game, take in the the parties, the hospitality suites, so many people from across the country coming together. And, it's just a spirit of camaraderie that I haven't seen at any other sporting event in my life. It was fantastic, and I'd love to do it again.
Yeah, absolutely. Brian?
Other than the loss.
That's right, exactly. Fingers crossed for next year in Edmonton, that's right. Brian Lilley, our contributor, joining me from Ottawa. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.